started. Thanks. All right, I'll go ahead and just kick this thing off while we're waiting for everybody else to sit down. But first off, good morning. I'm Wes Vaughn, class of 1996, and I am the chairman of the Beyond the Gates committee. So first off, thanks everybody for coming bright and early on a Friday morning. We appreciate you being here and look forward to a great event. The first thing I want to do is, the last time I stood up in front of a Beyond the Gates committee, a Beyond the Gates audience, I failed, total fail on my part, and I forgot to recognize two very important people, so I'm not going to do that this time. One of them is right here. This is Allie Prickett, and the other one is Katie Laney. Katie? No Katie? She's outside. But in her absence, could everybody give them a round of applause real quick? So for those of you that have ever been to an alumni event, these would not happen without Katie and Allie. And so we're just, as a committee, we're extremely thankful for them and their help. So just wanted to say that. Thanks. I'm going to go ahead and do a little audience participation. Raise your hand if you are in or have been involved in the commercial real estate industry. That's kind of what I figured. All right, so on that note, for those of you that are not in the commercial real estate industry, I have a pop quiz for you, and I have prizes. Raise your hand if you can name two people in the commercial real estate industry that are not here today or sitting up on the stage. Yes.
Oh, I don't want to name them.
What?
I didn't know I had to talk.
Okay. Anybody got two names for me? Yes.
Portman and Cousins.
There you go. Portman and Cousins. Okay, right. Larry Gellerstedt is the CEO of Cousins. Now, I'm going to get a little bit trickier. Raise your hand if you can name two members of the Westminster Alumni Board who are in the commercial real estate industry. Catherine Kelly and Blaine Kelly. I'm still looking for the right answer. Anybody? They're here today. Back in the back. I hear a Court Thomas, the president of the Alumni Board, right here in the front row. Anybody have another one? I'll give you a hint. He had to do with Ponce City Market. Anybody? John Wilson, are you here? There he is. All right. So, as you can see, there's no shortage of commercial real estate folks in the Westminster Alumni Network. But we have a great plan here today with 5 of the rock stars of the commercial real estate industry in Atlanta. And it just so happened that the prizes that nobody won were Cressa koozies. And if any of y'all are looking for office space, I know a guy, and I've got a stack of business cards in the back. I'm happy to chat with you about that. And these guys would be happy to have you at their building. And so would Court. And so would Alan Joel. If anybody would like to talk to Alan too, that'd be great. The person that I want to introduce first is Kennedy Hicks. Westminster had to do a little under-the-table dealings to get Kennedy on the schedule today. She is one of the rising superstars. Actually, she's not rising. She has risen. One of the risen superstars of the industry, and she's going to be our moderator today. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Kennedy.
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks, Wes. Good morning, everybody. This is an exciting topic, exciting panel for sure. Wes didn't ask people to raise their hands if they've been on the belt line, but I'm hoping that most people would be able to raise their hand for that. And so it's really exciting for me. I think when I think about what I do on a day-to-day basis, the Beltline's really given Atlanta a lot of street cred, and it's bringing a lot of new investors, new companies, when they're coming to Atlanta to be able to see what's happening, to see some of the adaptive reuse projects that these guys have been involved in. You know, it's powerful, and people get it and are really excited about what's happening in our city. And then you think about all the people from the Westminster community, not just on the stage, but elsewhere that are on the front end of what's been happening. And it's just, it's great to see. So the intent this morning is just to have a conversation about what's been happening, what's working, what's not, and then where we see the next decade of development and opportunity for the city. So I'd like for everyone to just give a quick introduction of themselves, maybe a little bit about what you do on a day-to-day basis, and then projects that you're involved with. James, start.
Sure. So my name is James Alexander. I'm a housing director with Atlanta Beltline Inc. I think people recognize me as Jimmy Alexander for folks that went to high school with me. So please feel free to get grandfathered in and call me Jimmy. I think a lot of other folks know me as Carmen Alexander's brother as well. She's another superstar. And thanks again for having me. It's good to see some faces that I recognize out in the audience. So again, I'm the housing director with Atlanta Beltline Inc. I've been with Atlanta Beltline for about 7 or 8 years now, working on land use planning, really preparing lands around the Atlanta Beltline for growth and development. Also focused on helping to support 28,000 new housing units along the Atlanta Beltline. There's been about 15,000 units built since 2005. And in addition to that, a particular focus on creating affordable and workforce housing along the Atlanta Beltline. We've got a goal to create about 5,600 units. So on a day-to-day basis, it's working with developers and policymakers to achieve that goal. So very happy to be here.
My name is David Cochran. I'm president of Tese Properties. I went here for 13 years, graduated in 1992, so thanks for having me back. Kind of shocked that you did, but I've been in the commercial real estate business my whole life, literally, because I run my father's old company, he passed away 20 plus years ago, but I've taken the company in quite a different direction. He was kind of a land guy outside of town, and I am an urban infill kind of guy. We mainly do adaptive reuse of historic structures and new construction as well, but largely our focus has been true urban infill for the last 5 to 10 years. The project that kind of put us back on the map from an adaptive reuse standpoint was a project called Croc Street Market, which I hope all of y'all have been to, and eaten and drank and had a blast there. So that project has been sort of transformative to our company and to the way we see real estate truly. It was an innovative project in the sense that Atlanta really had no food halls, but it was largely driven by the Beltline and some of the things we're talking about today, which Croc Street has close proximity to it. And we're trying to do Croc Street markets all over the southeast now. So we've got one going in Charlotte, and Charleston will be coming next, and then we'll see how many more we do after that. But thanks for having me here today.
My name's Hank Farmer. Graduated in 2003, so a couple years after all these guys. Started a company called Third and Urban about 2.5 years ago, and been focused on adaptive reuse kind of in the urban core and around the Beltline. The biggest project we've got going right now is one called Armory Yards around Sweetwater Brewery. It's about a 200,000 square feet adaptive reuse loft office deal that is actually on the starts of the Beltline that's not yet completed, kind of as you come through Ansley before you go up into Peachtree Hills. And then we got another project on the west side that we're trying to break ground on actually this month called Complex, which is kind of a creative flex deal that I may talk more about later. But it's kind of similar project, but right on the edge of the Beltline Overlay District. And I think, and then I guess previous to that, I was at Jamestown for close to 4 years working on Pond City Market. and a number of other projects kind of up and down the East Coast.
My name is Chris Bosemine. I graduated from Westminster in 1990. I guess I'm having to get used to being more the senior people on the senior person on these panels, but that's okay. Thank you for having me today. I've always been on the entrepreneurial side of the real estate development world, really focused on one neighborhood, probably around 15 years ago at this point, in West Midtown, kind of 14th Street and Howell Mill area, and started a company that really started assembling land over there, putting future land use policies that kind of was the roadmap from what's been developed in that side of town today, and was the developer on the White Provision project. Currently have a project called Stockyards that's under construction right now. But primarily, it's looking at how to kind of build a neighborhood in a lot of ways. Start from kind of just a destination, and at this point, with all the multifamilies coming in and the offices, really it's building a little neighborhood in the part of the city of Atlanta.
All right, thank you. Many of you probably saw this, but about a month or so ago, the New York Times published an article about the Beltline, and it was entitled "A Glorified Sidewalk and the Path to Transform Atlanta." The opening sentence was, "Could this traffic-clogged southern city, long derided as the epitome of suburban sprawl, really be discovering its walkable, bike-friendly, destiny-embracing, streetcar-riding, human-scale soul?" A little bit of a backhanded compliment, but good to get national press, nonetheless. So I guess, James, starting with you, given that this is something that you're living and breathing every day, what was your reaction to that article, and how do you think about it?
Well, after reading the title, I was offended. But I think, after reading the whole article, I think it highlights what's wonderful about the Atlanta Beltline and some challenges that we have moving forward. I think one of the reasons why I'm here today, and I think one of the reasons why the Atlanta Beltline is great, is I actually ran into Wes on the Beltline who said, "Hey, we're thinking about putting together this panel, we think you'd be great for it." So, it really is a place where you can walk, you can bike, on the sidewalk, rollerblade, but I think for a lot of people, it's a place where you can be where there are not automobiles or cars breathing down your neck, and it really is what a lot of people call a third place. It's not your home or your office or school. It's a place where you can go out and interact with other people and your neighbors. So I'm out on the Atlanta, I live in the 4th Ward now. I'm out on the Beltline with my girls probably once a week, and usually run into a couple of people who I know when I'm out there. And so I think that's something that definitely makes the Atlanta Beltline different than a glorified sidewalk. I think the other piece of it is just how comprehensive it is in nature. I think a lot of people, and just by a show of hands, how many of y'all have visited the East Side Trail in some form or fashion? Okay, great. So it's about 75% of the office, of folks here. So I think some of the other pieces are related to parks. The goal is to create 1,300 acres of new parks around the Atlanta Beltline. I think many have visited historic 4th Ward Park in the 4th Ward, but there's also Stanton Park in Peoplestown, Boulevard Crossing Park down in southeast Atlanta. And so I think the concept has really grown beyond just really looking at a trail. In addition to that, the goal is to create 22 miles of transit as well. So we do think about the Atlanta Beltline as really a transportation corridor. And finally, again, my focus is on housing, and I think this is a lot of what we'll talk about is, how can there be walkable, mixed use, mixed income communities created along the Atlanta Beltline. And I think there's a lot of really great early examples of that that have really been forwarded by the folks on this stage that really speaks to, I think in particular, millennials and people who are looking for more walkable environments in the city of Atlanta. And so I think that's the kind of soul that we're talking about is, you know, the ability to meet people who you know, that sort of third place idea, and just also the general notion that we're creating places that are walkable and that are mixed use and mixed income in nature.
Great. David, I think of Krog Street as sort of being a cornerstone to the Beltline. How has that evolved over the past couple of years as the Beltline's become more popular? How do you think about Krog Street now versus maybe when you got started with it a few years ago?
Well, truthfully, I will say that I definitely underestimated the power of the Beltline. I fell in love with Krog Street Market, which at the time was Tyler Perry's Studios. I fell in love with the neighborhood, and the fact that I was getting a lot of scale because I was buying the Stoneworks across the street, I was buying a full city block. It was on the future Beltline, which I could put on my marketing flyers, and I knew that it would help underwrite the deal. But at the same time, you know, everybody's a little bit distrustful about these massive sort of public-private partnerships between, you know, that require like Tese Bluffs and, you know, tax hikes and whatnot to fund them. And this was so just massive in scale. It was a 22-mile section of dead rail spur that supposedly was going to be sidewalks and mass transit and light rail. You know, I know Ryan Gravel very well, and it was really one of those things where I'm like, this is great. It's just someone's thesis. It's never going to happen. So therefore, I couldn't underwrite the fact that the Beltline was going to be something real and transformative. So therefore, we knew our deal worked without the Beltline. So therefore, the fact that the Beltline has been as transformative as it truly has been is just bonus. I really did underestimate it. I mean, I had a group come in town from Austin, Texas the other day. And we went and rented bikes and rode the Beltline. And I've seen the Beltline this way, and seeing an out-of-towner come into town, and they had a very sort of blasé view of Atlanta. These out-of-towners, they're super hipsters and cool.
Especially in Austin,
Yeah, they're a lot cooler than me for sure. And then they really kind of went away from it saying, your city's a lot cooler than I thought. I had no idea that y'all had this. So you were talking about third place. I mean, the Beltline in my mind is like, it's like the secret, you know, the lost city of Atlantis. People now say, well, I live on the Beltline. It's like this whole new place. And when you ride it, it literally is. It's like going in, you know, to the deep dark forest and everybody said you couldn't go in there, and then they plowed a sidewalk through it. And it's this whole new place. My business partner's child knocked her teeth out on the Beltline. You know, it's all these great experiences that you don't worry about. You know, she was skateboarding and just smack. But you don't worry about your children on the Beltline because of their cars. It's just a great thing, and I can't wait for them to finish the section that runs behind my building. That was not directed at you at all.
We're going to get some of that from this
Just wait, that's just a tee up.
That's why we're on this side.
I like it. I'll give it to Hank, so let the
East side, west
person
side.
down here.
Any unforeseen challenges with just the idea of, you know, traditionally people arrive by car, they come in, they go into Krog Street, eat, and then they leave. But with a lot of people now, most people coming in off the Beltline, has that created any challenges, or is there something you would have done differently now, knowing how successful that the Beltline's been?
Are you alluding to all the bad social media we caught about booting cars in the parking lot? There are some challenges. I mean, people love the Beltline, and therefore we own Krog Street Market, the Stoneworks, and a parking lot that's on the Beltline. So therefore we own a parking lot on the Beltline. We're perceived as being this philanthropic company that just allows people to park there and go explore the free Beltline. You know, so it's tough in that sense. But what we are noticing is that more people are using the Beltline in sort of a reverse way. They're not actually driving. In concept, it's kind of bizarre. You drive to the Beltline, then you use this sort of public, you know, transit. Like you walk it, ride your bike, or just hang out on it. But you drive your car there, so it's kind of backwards. So people are doing that less. They're actually riding their bike to the Beltline and then riding their bike on the Beltline, which is great. And just to plug, Tese Bluffs, please vote yes. Come on, they go hand in hand. But there are challenges. Did I say that the big challenge was they haven't finished the section behind my building yet? Because it literally just ends. It ends at Krog Street, which is great, but it should continue. So I think the main thing is that we've all got to do better about putting bike racks on the properties. Having the ability to rent bikes is huge. There should be more of that. There should be bike share programs. There should be ride share lots. There's a lot of stuff. They should do good traffic protection measures at crossings of the Beltline. Right now, they're not. And I'm terrified somebody's going to get run over right in front of our building. So there are some challenges, but it's all for the greater good. I mean, the Beltline is a massive improvement for the city of Atlanta and overall for its sort of being not for a place that is traffic clogged.
I think it represents too more of a kind of the general Atlanta acceptance of the adaptive reuse, the want to be a part of a community where you can walk and ride your bike and eat at local restaurants that are indigenous to the city. And so you guys both have projects that I think are very representative of that. How have you seen, maybe Chris, start with you, given your involvement in Puritan Mill and White Provisions, and then now today, how have you seen the just sort of mentality around these projects change, either from capital partners or tenants or just the general population?
Sure. I think a lot of what we've done is when we started all this in the Beltline, kind of like David, the Beltline on our little section of the world around 14th and Howell Mill is in the plans, and we'll get to us at some point. It's not there. But I think in a lot of ways, what we have done is we were kind of one of the early folks going over there in these old warehouses and kind of creating a model of adaptive reuse, and adaptive reuse being the economic generator for new construction. And I think although we're not really the beneficiary of the Beltline today, I think that our model of what we did over there has been kind of adapted by projects that you really see popping up on the East Side Trail. When we started on over there, it was it was an old buildings and it was kind of an old industrial part of town. And so from the capital partners' perspective, there was had to get creative capital stacks. It was historic tax credits. It was friends and family. It was kind of cobbling this, finding a local bank to kind of lend on these projects. It was everyone. I always remember King Plow Art Center. You would walk in there, and everyone would say, "This is the greatest place in the world." And I'd be like, "Great, how about lending us money on this project? It's going to look just like it." And they'd be like, "Hell no, I'm not doing that. Lose my job." And I think what's happened is that over the past 15 years, we've kind of gone from being this entrepreneurial, kind of small projects with smaller tenants. When we started, it was architecture firms, it was creative firms, or maybe 2,500 to 5,000 square feet. Whereas today, it's firms like Jamestown and Pond City Market, a group that we're working with now, based out of DC money, that's in a West Midtown deal called Stockyards. Our tenants have gone from 2,500 square feet to 45,000 square feet. And so I think that from what we're seeing in the adaptive reuse place, it's kind of it's quality of space that people want to see. Although we don't have the Beltline in our area yet, we kind of have the same feel of creating a walkable community where you can have new housing, kind of offices and cool old buildings. And I think Hank's kind of doing the same thing in another little segment. So,
yeah, I echo all that on the capital partners, but I think it all comes down to what the places that people want to be, and that's why there's money from the capital side coming in, and that's why there's companies that are looking at it as we're going to take space in this old loft building, not because it's the value play, but because it's the culture that we're trying to represent, and it's we see it as a recruitment tool and an employee retention tool. And so, you look at it from that perspective, and it's a little bit unfortunate that Atlanta kind of has a history of tearing down buildings, and I think we talk a lot about how we think that, the suburbs have really been on kind of like a 30-year run here, and we think that infill and in town is kind of going on a 30-year run now, and I think the Beltline's a huge catalyst for that, and the East Side Trail is an interesting microcosm for that because it's 2 miles, and it actually is kind of through kind of all of the prime adaptive reuse stuff. And so you've seen, $2.5 billion of investment. A lot of that's been new multifamily, but it's been a lot of great adaptive reuse projects as well. I think it'll be interesting to see kind of, as the Beltline extends, and it's a pretty easy path kind of what David's talking about down to Grant Park, and it's a pretty easy path up to us at Armory Yards because you've got a very kind of continuous rail spur. But then you get over to the west side and it gets very complicated. And you get through the northern neighborhoods and it's going to be much more of a neighborhood feel. So I think we're really interested in looking at thinking about how the Beltline is going to interact with all of these different uses and neighborhoods because it's going to be very different than the East Side Trail. But I think it can be like really great kind of everywhere it goes and just the connection from Peachtree Hills and Garden Hills. You don't realize that all of a sudden Peachtree Hills is 2 miles from Piedmont Park and 3 miles from Pond City Market and 4 miles from Broad Street Market on a bike, and that's you can get there. You can probably walk there faster than you could get there in a car.
We've actually done that. Driven to Ponds versus on the Beltline during like normal traffic times.
And then imagine it.
Faster on the Beltline.
Imagine it when it connects all the way through to kind of the South Buckhead neighborhoods.
Ratio.
Yeah.
One of the fun aspects of the adaptive reuse development is just the uncharted territory, right? It's you don't often know what you're getting into when you buy these old warehouses. Hank, anything as you've gone through Armory Yards, anything that you've learned or you think you'd do differently on the next one?
Yeah, I mean they're all very unique, and Chris and I have actually talked about this a lot recently. I mean, just the amount of kind of time and brain damage that these things take compared to folks that are building 220 unit apartment complexes and kind of stamp them out and have a program. But I think it's something that we fundamentally enjoy and like spending time on, and like the places that we're creating, and like the fact that we can make a place that take kind of what we're doing around Sweetwater, and we've got this really cool local coffee shop going in there, and we just opened a Fox Brothers barbecue and we turned a shipping container into a Fox Brothers barbecue. We got another restaurant going in, and just feel like that neighborhood, along with kind of everything that Sweetwater's doing, everything that American Spirit Whiskey is doing, is just kind of it's fundamentally changing. It's becoming more interesting, and eventually kind of becomes a spur off the Beltline once it comes behind Ainsley Mall and through Ainsley Golf Club. And so it's although at times it can feel like a lot of brain damage, and it can feel like you're spinning your wheels, just the types of places that you can create, I think, are just fundamentally more interesting. And I think because of that, from a risk profile standpoint and an investment standpoint, we feel like that risk-adjusted return is kind of justified.
I think one other thing, looking at kind of risks going into it, is I think that it's just there's a lot of one of the biggest things for us going into these things is you're going into old warehouses, old industrial facilities, and so it's finding the right the environmental of these projects. You're basically taking an old warehouse and now you're putting people who are either living or working in these places. And from a policy perspective, the Georgia EPD created a program called the Georgia Brownfields Program, which, although Brownfields might sound bad, is actually a great program, because what it is almost a partnership with EPD to say, hey, we want to redevelop this. This is what we want to do. We want to let people live in here and do all this. But we want, as the owner developer, some recognition from compliance that that we're doing everything that we should do from a transparency perspective. And I think getting from the from kind of the risks, that's a great thing, because you can go and you can do all the testing, and you kind of have someone saying, yeah, there's a standard of care that's been established. So I think with all these projects, you're going to find certainly there's always unforeseen conditions in these things, and you just kind of get used to doing it. Project we're working on right now, I think we poked and prodded at it for 18 months, and although we haven't found tons of things we didn't know were there, you start cutting back walls, and like, oh my gosh. Now it becomes like a history of like a forensic, like why would this be here? And so you're like thinking, all right, so this one's a slaughterhouse. You're like, all right, well maybe they were trying to create a cold area. And so there's always unforeseen conditions with it. But I think the biggest thing is just from our perspective is going into these old buildings is just providing a safe environment for folks in building sort of one-time heavy industrial.
I mean, the brownfield comment is dead right. I mean, that program is phenomenal, but literally 5 years ago, if brownfield came up in our due diligence, it equaled terminate and walk away from the deal. We did one deal in the brownfield program, and that's when we all realized, like, this is here for a benefit. And right now we're cleaning up, literally it was on the Dirty Dozen EPD sites. They used to do HVAC coils there. They had a pit underneath the building. Then basically all of the degreaser is this chemical that's awful. Like if it gets on you, your nervous system will shut down. But they had this pit underneath where they did the HVAC coils. It was their cleaning agent. And it's like one dude in a company staff meeting one day raised his hand and said, "Do you realize that in 40 years the pit's never filled up?" And somebody went, "Maybe holes in that pit." Sure enough, there's a clue of environmental toxicity on this site that we are now we actually have cleaned it through some of the most radical environmental cleaning agent tools where we were able to keep the buildings there. We cored holes in the floor, stuck electrified rods down there, vaporized I mean, it sounds almost fake, but we did it. And it does. It's like they said you can't come in here while we're doing this. I'm like, are they really doing anything? And then yesterday I was down there because we've now fully started construction on the site. And I kid you not, we found an 18-wheeler trailer on the site that we didn't know was there. We just thought it was weeds and ivy. And I was watching them, and I watched this backhoe hit the weeds and ivy yesterday, and it made this massive noise. And next thing he grabs it by the collar like a dog and just drags this 18-wheeler. Someone's home. They weren't in it, thankfully. But you do find it went from a safe, giant safe, drywalled into a 4 walls and wall. So I thought it was going to be full of money and jewels. Zero.
We still have not found gold. We found lots of things underground that we don't think we're going to find, but gold and diamonds has never been one of them. So that kind of also goes to one of the earlier questions about the changing, and I think, again, that piece of it becomes real important to the overall development of the Beltline, is that because there's now this brownfield program, bringing in that larger capital partner, they now know that they feel much more comfortable in investing in one of these projects because now they feel like they have that protection level, whereas before it was you didn't know. And so I think that the adaptive reuse is great, the Beltline is great, but I think also Georgia Brownsfield has been a great kind of great at bringing in the capital partner that is the money that allows this stuff to happen.
I think at this point it's in this kind of like a running joke and a badge of honor of who can talk about the dirtiest site that they have. They used to dump
Used to not be that way.
next to Puritanville. But I think that's like you said, it's part of doing work on the Beltline. The fact that it was a rail corridor that was originally built as kind of a spur around Atlanta and therefore spawned all this heavy industrial, and so you're going to run into it. And so having that kind of toolkit of ways that you can solve these problems and limit liability and get people comfortable is really one of the things that really opens up the development of the Beltline.
Something that I just find interesting is in terms of what people in this village share is just the optimism with which you go into your work to look at something and say, we know that there are going to be problems and know that you can get through it. And also, because you're going into a situation that others might say hard stop, you're really extracting value from that. One example I'll give, and this isn't really commercial real estate, but just with historic Fourth Ward Park. That really came from the ideas of neighborhood groups, some activists who looked at a flooding problem near what was City Hall East at the time. So if you know where Virginia Highlands is, and it's called Virginia Highlands for a reason, and where Midtown is, and the sort of Bank of America Tower, there's a real dip where Pond City Market now is. And so the city was under a consent decree basically to handle those stormwater issues, because whenever it rained a lot, you get a lot of flooding problems down there. And so what the city was going to do was basically to build a bigger pipe underneath City Hall East, underneath a bunch of parking lots in the area. And really the neighborhood groups, activists, architects kind of came together and said, well, instead of doing that, why don't we solve the problem by building a large stormwater retention pond that actually feels like an amenity. something that you can walk around, something that can be a centerpiece of this park. And I think it's a real example of, folks actually looking at problems and situations, figuring out, elegant solutions to them. The park itself is about $20 million cheaper than the pipe.
Well, I think also it speaks to kind of public-private partnership, because what a lot of people don't realize about that park as well is there's an old brick culvert that runs under Pont City Market, and that holds Clear Creek, and the basement used to completely flood, every time they had a hard rain, and so there was no way to ever, would have been a real challenge to redevelop that building, but making historic Fourth Ward Park really opened up the opportunity and allowed Jamestown to step in and be able to execute that redevelopment because of something the city did to fix that issue.
And speaking of public-private partnerships, David already alluded to this, but as we all know, there's a big election on Tuesday. And part of what will be on that ballot is a referendum it's significant, and it's intended to really help advance Atlanta from a transit perspective, and a lot of it's a sales tax referendum, and a lot of that money is going to go to the Beltline and to MARTA. So James, maybe you can just give a quick overview on how that will affect the Beltline.
Sure. So there are two ballot initiatives. The first is what people call Tese Bluffs, and that's an acronym, I think, to hide the fact that the word tax is in there somewhere. But it's really for transportation projects in the city of Atlanta. From an Atlanta Beltline perspective, the primary project that is on there is to what we call close the loop, or to actually acquire most of the remaining right-of-way that's necessary to build out the remainder of the Atlanta Beltline project. We've talked a lot about the East Side Trail. That is complete. Haven't talked about the West Side Trail, which will be completed next year in 2017. There's a large segment in the south and also in the east where Rob Fortson lives that really is owned by a railroad company, and we don't have the resources to be able to buy it. And so that Tese Bluffs will provide the resources to be able to do that, and also to lock down other corridors near where Hank and his company is building.
And so, obviously there's some self-serving aspects for us in wanting to connect Armory Yards to Piedmont Park and therefore to the East Side Trail. But to me, the vote is a little bit more fundamental than that. It's kind of, is Atlanta going to, and none of us really like tax increases, right? But is Atlanta going to, make an effort to figure out transportation problems and to create alternative transportation? Or is Atlanta going to kind of ignore the problem and wait another 5 or 10 years and think about voting with the tax again? And I think that this is an opportunity for us to kind of all collectively make a stand and say, we recognize that for our city to really become a true urban environment, that we need to invest in transportation infrastructure, and we're willing to step up and say that now's the time to do that. And you can argue about what projects are on the list, and, other funding sources that could potentially be used for that, and all these other things. But to me, it's more about kind of stepping up and saying that we're gonna figure out a solution to transportation problems in Atlanta.
And thank you, Hank. I can't actually say whether or not you should vote for it. So I appreciate that.
Sorry, you work for a nonprofit, you're right.
So the other piece, just from an information standpoint, is a MARTA sales tax. So that'll be a half-penny sales tax for a series of rail and bus investments, all within the city of Atlanta. There's a long list of proposed projects, but we do expect a number of Atlanta Beltline projects to be built out as a result of this ballot initiative if it is passed. So we think about the East Side Trail as a trail now, but there's also the opportunity to build transit there, to connect it up with the existing Atlanta streetcar, to connect in with major employment centers, both downtown and midtown, So just as Hank is saying, it's really creating an opportunity where there's a more walkable environment, and we're really building out the existing spine that exists for Marta.
Well, one thing just to add to that's a little bit different, but again, is kind of going on the premise of no one really likes additional taxes. One of the things when we realized in our area of town is that Howell Mill has become it's become clogged, and with the Beltline being somewhat in the future for us, how do we solve this? And so the idea of the CID, a Community Improvement District, was kind of pitched to us, and it was actually pitched by a Westminster graduate, Elizabeth Mason Hollister, class of 2005, and she came with it. Sometimes you're like that, like that.
Why didn't I think of this?
Anyone from 05 in here?
She came and she went and talked for about a year, all the people up and down, and it really was like a political process where she went and met with all the commercial property owners and basically got people to agree that yes, we want to tax ourselves for improvements. And so that's really kind of on a local level, I think what T-Plus is on a macro level. And what has now happened is we now have a board. We're a community improvement district. We recently hired Elizabeth as the executive director. Probably fair since it was her idea to begin with. And we're in the process of working through managing about $6 million of improvements to make Howell Mill a complete street. And so for people that sometimes think that voting for these tax increases is just a waste of money, you're not going to see it today, but in about 2 years, when you look on Howell Mill, you're going to see what happens when people say, you know what, let's get together and put some money into this and help solve some of these problems, as opposed to sitting in traffic and saying, golly, the traffic is horrible. So.
I think also between the two votes, I think some people don't realize how kind of integral those are to each other. And you think about, I heard Marta describe one time as kind of a spine, and it doesn't really connect a lot to a lot. It's good to go to the airport, but I think the huge opportunity is James, there's going to be 5 potential connections between the Beltline, light rail, and Marta. You start to think about that 22-mile loop with light rail on it, and 5 different connections to Marta, and then that takes you kind of north, south, east, and west, along with streetcars, whether it's, streetcars down Edgewood or a streetcar down 10th that connects all the way across. All those things start to work together, and that's how you really end up with a public transportation infrastructure that actually takes you from the place that you are to the place that you want to be.
That's a good point. So we want to get to a question and answer section in just a second, but I think as James alluded to, everyone on this stage is sort of paid to be optimistic and is by nature optimistic. So I guess thinking about the next opportunity, David, what excites you? Where do you see the next Frog Street Market, next place to obviously Charleston and Charlotte, but within Atlanta?
Yeah, Charlotte, it's going to be called Tompkins Hall, and it's underway already. I think that Hank said it best earlier when he said that what we're doing. First of all, real estate development in general is not easy. If it was easy, everybody would do it. That's what my dad always used to say to me. But the adaptive reuse, the in-town development, whatnot. Sometimes I look at the 220-unit deal out on in Norcross, and I envy it because it looks like it was easy to do. But then I remember that I'm driven to be proud of what I do for our city, and therefore, if I drove by that 220-unit deal in Norcross, I would not tell somebody that I owned it or built it, because they would be like, why? Why'd you do that? So, I think that more people need to be prouder of, when you dabble with the landscape of a city and with people's lives in this business, you've got to take pride in it. If you don't, then shame on you, because it's just about money. So I think that's what drives me every day, and that's where I see the future. More people be passionate about what they're doing, about what this guy does every day. Talk about banging your head against the wall, but it's all coming into shape. It's working. It's finally working, so you've got a hard head. So I think, Atlanta needs to decide if it's going to grow up. Are we going to grow up and be the next great big city, or are we going to be that place that happened to have Home Depot and therefore got a bazillion stadiums and it has the busiest airport. That's it. We got to grow up and be an urban city and be united in that and stop being divided and really just grow up. And I think Tese Bluffs helps. Have I said that?
Yeah. Yeah, I think for future, and I'm not going to, there's obviously a couple places that, we're paying attention to and kind of watching right now, maybe not get down to like streets and areas. But I think if Atlanta grew out for the past 50 years, I think Atlanta's going to continue to grow in. And I think you're going to find areas that are more, that are perhaps not on anyone's direct path right now, but have great access to transportation and have a much more of an urban footprint. The one place I think is I do think you're going to start seeing a lot of neat stuff happening in downtown Atlanta, and I think anything on the Beltline. So I think as a whole, as a general, anything that has access to transportation or has kind of a cool urban infill, I think is that's what people want right now. It's amazing to me, but a lot of these glass towers that people think are so so pretty and cost so much money to build, a lot of the tenants don't want to necessarily be there.
Yeah, I think I was talking to Chris yesterday actually, he said the same thing. He was talking about an early tour of White Provision and a tenant saying, well, where's your lobby? And Chris saying, well, we don't have a lobby, we have this great amenity of all these things around us. And I think that's, I think you can look at the west side, or you can look at what's going on the east side trail. But I think there's a lot of other great small commercial nodes in Atlanta. I know Paces has got some stuff over in East Atlanta Village, and Oakhurst, all the way up to Virginia Highlands, all these little pocket kind of commercial nodes. I think you're going to continue to see interesting things happening around those. People wanting to live around those, trying to figure out affordability around those, because affordability is kind of quickly evaporating there. And so I think, beyond just the Beltline, anywhere you have those really interesting little commercial nodes, I think we'll continue to see interesting things happening and good growth.
I think, just quickly to the comment of banging your head against the wall.
You agreed real quickly.
My sense of it, and before I worked in this job, I did affordable housing development for about 5 years.
You're a veteran.
And so we used to say, this job is like banging your head against the wall until it goes through. So
more of attrition.
I think a lot of the commercial opportunities that you typically hear about are in about 5 different nodes around the Atlanta Beltline. We talked about the Armour area. We talked about the 4th Ward in the Park area. West Midtown, there's a lot of work happening along Memorial Drive in that node. I think in terms of what's next, there's probably 15 others around the Atlanta Beltline in markets that are not as hot. So down south of Grant Park, near Boulevard Crossing Park, I think there's a lot of opportunities down there. We recently purchased about 16 acres down in southwest Atlanta, down at the Mercury Crossing area. So down around near University Avenue. We think there's a lot of opportunities down there as well. And the other piece, just would like to highlight in terms of what's next to sort of lift up one of Hank's comments and the sort of thing that I struggle with every day is just the affordability piece. So I think all of the reinvestment, all the excitement around the Atlanta Beltline has really caused some real affordability issues and challenges for neighborhood residents who have been living around the Atlanta Beltline for many years who find it difficult to stay, whether it's being able to pay additional property taxes or whether it's being able to pay additional rent. And so I think just from a challenge and how we as a community need to come together to figure out how to solve it is how do we make sure that people can stay and really take advantage of all the benefits that are being built along the Atlanta Beltline. And that's not the kind of thing that can be just done by city government. I think it's got to be the smart minds of people on this stage as well. So in terms of what's next and a challenge, I think in order for the Beltline to continue to be successful, we've got to make an argument to all of the city of Atlanta that the project is for them. So I think that's a real challenge for us that we can solve, but it's going to be a challenge for us.
All right, we'll open it up to the audience if anyone has questions.
I'm so glad, okay. I'm so glad you said that last comment because it's fascinating what's been done for the Beltline, but it is tragic as far as the city of Atlanta has the #1 highest inequality in this country. And the development of the city is imperative that we get this lower socioeconomic group up into the middle income. Doesn't affect you guys, but it affects your children. The continuing well-being of Atlanta will not occur unless what you discussed in this last thing occurs. You have the scandal of the Beltline. Ryan Gravel and Nathaniel Smith quit in September under protest because he said, this is NPR, worried it is not focused enough on equitable development and affordable housing. And I'm sure that's your law in your city,
Right.
that part of the city. Okay, Tom Cousins with Eastlake has done phenomenal, according to Scott Lyman in an article yesterday in Wall Street Journal. Why have they done such an incredible job at that? And the Beltline has not. Can y'all use any of, Warren Buffett's taking it over. Shirley Franklin's going to be thinking, or can you get Tom to come in and help and pull these wonderful, more rich Tom Cousins Juniors in?
Yeah.
You got to
Back in this already. I don't look like that.
What do we do? Because right now it's been very disappointing. I mean, as far as I don't like being #1 in income inequality in the country. I do not like seeing what's happening to our city with racism. It's getting worse. So that's my question. Whole group. What are y'all going to do with this? What Tom did?
I think you gotta be, I agree with you. It's tough though. What Tom did, what Cousins did in Eastlake is a model for a sort of mixed income, redevelopment of an area. There's a question of scale though as well. The Beltline's like 18 feet wide. And then it's surrounded by privately owned real estate. Tom went out and painted with a very large brush, meaning he went and bought 500 acres in East Point, or East Lake, which is to say, when he bought it, it was blighted. So now he's done a great job, but again, huge canvas, massive ability to, one, buy it right and to redo it in a proper way. Now, did it work? He's done a great job, but he also had to bring in massive corporate aspects, i.e. the golf course went fully corporate membership versus private membership. So it's a question of scale as well. So the Beltline, it's tougher. You know how much Beltline property trades for? It's insane. Even now on the future Beltline pieces, the property values have driven, through the roof. So it's a question of scale and ability. So that's where his job comes into play when it comes to my job and what we do. This private-public partnership, and it has to work in order to get these components in to future developments. It's tough. It's a hard one. We struggle with it every day. Every one of us do, because we want to, what we do is supposedly for the greater good, and that component comes in, but it can't be fully philanthropic. Otherwise, we'll all go out of business.
Yeah, and to kind of what David's saying, I think one of the big differences too is understanding the, look to the money. The Cousins Family Foundation went and basically purchased it all and had a plan and brought in partners, and they kind of had a long-term plan. If you look at the funding, I'll let James kind of maybe a little more intimately knows this, but the primary funding source of the Beltline is a tax increment over a base year tax. And so the Beltline, by definition, has to create greater taxes every year. And so I think what you've seen is the initial phase of the Beltline was to, they've created this fantastic program, and now all of these people want to build stuff there. And I think that's really, now that the tax increment has now been created and the funding source has been created, the next stage of that is to figuring out how you can create affordable housing as more of a focus point. a lot of it is you first start with just like, how do we get people here? And I think that, to a lot of people, and I know Ryan very well, when you have a plan, it's one thing to have a plan, and then the execution of that plan starts to take time. So I think now it's kind of that next, everything kind of goes through different levels of problems, so to speak. And that's obviously a problem right now, but as someone who works with his office on various things, it is probably on the top of their list right now.
And there's no silver bullet there. I mean, there's the social investment side of things, and there's some zoning things that we can do as far as density bonuses for affordable housing, and there's the Beltline Affordable Housing Trust Fund that gets funded by tax increment, and so there's you can't look and say here's what we're going to do to solve this problem. I think you have to tackle it from a lot of different angles, and you need a lot of different folks being creative about it, and you need it to work on the private investment side, and you need it to work on the nonprofit side and on the public side, and all those things are working together.
And I think that this is an issue that cities are facing across the country. And we're certainly facing not just on the Atlanta Beltline, but in the city of Atlanta. I think there were many years in a lot of these neighborhoods, it was really chasing this kind of redevelopment, which people wanted to see. And now that it's occurred, I think folks have seen how quickly this affordability and equity issue has crept up. But I will say that there are some solutions to this, and my background is really in community development and planning. And the way that I typically think about influencing development is through land, money, zoning. From a land perspective, the Trust for Public Land did something amazing back in the early 2000s when I think no one believed in the Atlanta Beltline. And that was to go about buying land for parks before land prices increased. So you talked about how much land per acre costs on the east side, $2 million plus per acre. That's difficult to compete with now. But I think there are areas along the Atlanta Beltline where we could think of acquiring land early. I think that's going to take substantial scale of resources and money. I think what you've seen in other cities who have faced this challenge, there's large-scale philanthropic investment to manage the equity issue citywide. You don't see as much of that in the city of Atlanta. Sustained philanthropic foundation contributions to affordable housing and economic development. And I think the third thing is zoning. And something that has really been missed, I think, with this first round of development is, frankly, some level of a requirement that there be affordable housing in every development. And that's something that has to be done very carefully because you don't want to kill the goose. And these are investors who can invest in Charlotte, they can invest anywhere in the Southeast. And we really want to make sure that people are continuing to build along the Atlanta Beltline and in the city of Atlanta. But those are things that we were thinking about, but it's got to take a substantial shift in terms of funding for it, and also public policy for it at the city of Atlanta and at the state of Georgia.
Thanks. Next question.
A question for James. Are there any plans, if so, how and when are you trying to connect Silicon to the Beltline?
Our main focus is completing the actual Atlanta Beltline loop itself. That segment that you're referring to is challenging. In the Northwest, it's currently owned by CSX, and it's a very active railroad segment. It's one of the main arteries into the city of Atlanta itself. So in the Northwest, it's really going to require allowing or getting CSX to agree to share that railroad right-of-way. And frankly, that's going to take time because I think from their perspective, there's liability and risk in having people walking down a trail next to a major freight railroad track. So there's certainly some complications in the Northwest itself.
Part of the lines are a bit abandoned. Chris, you can address that.
The DeForest line? Yeah, I know that Ed McBrayer's group, Path Foundation, has been probably studying that connection, but I was really unaware of any kind of connection at this point on the books into the Beltline.
I have a question following up on a comment that was made about downtown being another future hotspot of potential development. My question relates to the south downtown area of basically south of Underground Atlanta near the government offices. I was wondering what you thought the catalyst might be or how to get that area really going. A lot of people have done some things on it, but it still continues to be an area that's somewhat blighted. And wondering if you have
Two words, it's Underground Atlanta.
Yeah, and I think
It has to happen.
So when I said I wasn't going to say any particular areas, okay. So now South Downtown. I think South Downtown has a grid network. It has public transportation. It actually has some great buildings, infrastructure. It has a lot of the things that we all look for. It also has an arts generator component of it. Anthony from the Goat Farm, which is right next to us, has gone down there and really kind of created a great, kind of a great little scene down there. I think one of the problems is everything with real estate is also timing. One of my issues with South Downtown right now is that every landowner now is trying to sell their building for top dollar, and that becomes a problem. We can talk about the issues of affordability, but let's just talk about having a financially solvent project. People talk about, I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings where people are like, so we've got these old buildings, and we really want this arts community and kind of a cool thing, and I'm like, all right, what do you need in rent? And basically they're talking about market rents for Buckhead. And I said, you missed like 3 steps. And so, ironically, I think one of the things that area needs is a good recession. I think the land prices have gotten too high, and so I think a lot of the things that can make that area neat and cool and allow for affordable and everything else to happen. There's too many speculators down there right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was down there yesterday walking through the old Constitution building, which is probably why my voice sounds like this today, because it's literally like a zombie apocalypse happening in the building. But I'm standing on the roof of the old Constitution building, which is 143 Alabama Street, and I'm looking at the roof, which has now become a green roof, accidentally, because it's just got luscious fauna and flora everywhere. And I'm standing there and I'm looking at the federal courthouse, which is right next to it, and this building is crumbling. And then beyond in the distance, I'm seeing Mercedes Stadium, and then I see the Georgia Dome, and then I see Phillips Arena, and I see CNN. And I took a picture of it because, and I showed it to my 5-year-old daughter, and she said, basically, that's strange. Because she's looking at this decrepit building in the background. She's seeing that. She said, is that the new Falcon Stadium? I said, yes. Well, why is that there? A 5-year-old gets it. But the city owns that building, and I know it's basically going to be impossible, I think. I think it's impossible now, but
there's a lot of opportunities down there. I think that those buildings represent what kind of that younger demographics are looking for. That's kind of what to me is appealing about that area. Is it's old building, it's a grid system, it's public transportation. It's just the rents have to be at a place where people can
well, it's because now a loft office is the rage. So you got an old building. I'll make a creative loft office, and I will charge $40 a foot.
That's right.
And so therefore the math works now because you thought you were underwater on an old building, but now you're in the money. The question is a company going to relocate their employees there and actually office there? I don't know. I mean, South Downtown's tough. Everything hinges, and is hanging in balance on whether or not Underground Atlanta happens, I think. That's the only way you connect. You know, we did the first apartment deal in downtown Atlanta, possibly, I mean, in the last 35 years. We took an old office building and converted it to apartments. The only reason, it was still the hardest deal to finance ever, but it was on the northern tip of downtown. So now you're talking about the southern tip of downtown. So if these guys can get to a point where they can actually transact and do the underground deal, it can be a game changer. If they don't, it's going to be more of the same for a long period of time. It'll always be the place that you went to go to a basketball game, a football game, and that's it, or a convention, and then you left.
And for one more.
So as a native Atlantan with 5 generations, having grown up in the Northeast, but having returned to Atlanta, and just spent a week in Lower Manhattan and Brooklyn this summer, I would take a Beltline, because that was like Dante's Inferno to me for the week, riding the subways. So I laud y'all's efforts. For lack of vision, the people perish. My one question is, do we have any anthropological or archaeological, they say you can't turn a stone over in Rome, or in London just did their big redo of their tube, finding stuff from Roman times. Are we keeping an eye, anybody even just for James?
Yeah.
Are there any archaeological? I've worked with the Riverline Historic Area in Mableton to protect some of the revetments and the earthworks. Are we keeping an eye as we're going through these buildings and finding safes and other things for archaeological and anthropological surveys? Thank you.
Yeah, I would say that there's no center place where that is happening. It certainly happens with each project that we build. Usually in order to be eligible for federal grants, you have to do that kind of background archaeological research and commit to stopping at certain times when you find things. A couple of examples I'll give. We found wooden manholes, tunnels that we didn't know existed. We didn't know why they were there under the East Side Trail. And we certainly keep all that information. We have thought about some partnerships with Georgia State in particular to help to catalog that over time. We also, just from a documents perspective, been working with the Atlanta History Center as well. But from an archaeological standpoint, fundamentally right now we don't have a center partner or place where all that information is being kept.
All right, I have to ask the one question that hasn't been asked. What about your Westminster education major also? 30 seconds, please.
30 seconds. It actually has a lot because I think that even though as entrepreneurial and creative as a lot of my ideas were, I understood that it had to, there's a certain box that things have to fit within. So, you can come to creative solutions of problems, but, at a certain point, there is a, there's a certain box that things have to fit in. It's, I think the second thing is just people that I've met. I mean, interestingly, tenants, CID, people that I work with on a daily basis. The network is an amazing network.
Yeah, I think network's a huge one. I think just some of the basic skills that we use every day that aren't quite as right brain, but writing and math and things like that. I mean, this isn't high finance, but certainly like you're saying, I mean, there's a lot of capital partners, very sophisticated capital partners where you're writing 10-page memos about issues that you're running into in these old buildings, and so I think just the background that it gave us in addition to that network.
I mean, I would say certainly the network and just the people you come across that have ties back to Westminster is impressive all over the country. And then for me, just sort of the love of information and always wanting to know what's going on.
I'll agree with the connection side of it, but it's hard work. I mean, hard work going to school here for one. I had to work my tail off under that. But at the same time, all work and no play makes people very dull and like to shine. So I think that it's look at my socks. Exactly. All work, business, play. You know, the well-balanced life is key. You know, my parents said that to me the whole time I was growing up, but I never really got it until I had a bunch of kids. And yeah, you gotta have balance in your life, and I think Westminster taught me a lot of that. I look back on it now and say, well, maybe I got it there. But you know, just hard work and some play. Got to play.
Yeah, and you know, I think that after having studied at Westminster, and I think a lot of people will agree with this, academically it's the hardest thing you'll ever do. And in terms of, you know, how hard you work here. And I think those values, and you know, having those values of hard work instilled in us is really important. Certainly the network, but I'd say the writing thing, sort of having that going into college and taking that with us into our professional careers, which really started with Mr. Finjway back there. So I didn't like it at the time. You made us write out those 5-page essays.
Five.
Was it 5?
10. Handwritten, single spaces.
But it makes a real difference throughout my career.
So I want to say too, and I just want to say on behalf of the school, just you know, how proud the institution is of you all, and also the way that you've taken that education. And we heard over and over again, either directly or indirectly, the application to the greater good and to making the city a better place. And I think that's a big part of the legacy of this school, and it's what we're doing with our students. As we sit here today, there's 1,860 kids, and we're looking for the place that blends their kind of intellectual passion with a mission in their lives. And that mission could be across any number of different things, but it's bound together by an idea that it's for the greater good. And that certainly is what you all represent. And I think that you all have carried that real effectively to us. So congratulations on all you're doing. We will see you on the Beltline, and thank you so much for being a part of this panel.